I'm Kristin Molitor. Welcome to the Transforming Hearts podcast, brought to you by the Institute for Ministry Formation. We believe that transforming the church starts with transforming hearts. Join us as we explore ministry through the lens of relationship and accompaniment. Together, let's journey towards growth, healing, and transformation. Hello and welcome to the Transforming Hearts podcast. This is Kristin Molitor with the Institute for Ministry Formation. And today we have an exciting and special guest on our show, Michael King, who is actually an alumni of the IMF Spiritual Direction Program and a part of the Detroit cohorts of spiritual directors that we talked about in our last podcast episode. Michael is a man of many talents and gifts and experience. He's an adjunct professor at Sacred Heart Seminary. He's a faith formation specialist with a bachelor's degree in psychoanalytic psychology. He has a master's degree in theology and is a certified spiritual director. He has worked in faith formation for over 20 years in the Archdiocese of Detroit and has been married for 31 years with 3 adult children and grandchildren. Yes, exciting. Michael's ministry has been focused on family and helping others discover how to live an abundant life in Christ Jesus. And before we introduce, or before Michael has a chance to share, I just want to share a little bit about Michael. I first met Michael at the first spiritual direction course that I took with the Institute for Ministry Formation. So that was the Art of Accompaniment course a few years ago. And so just getting a chance to connect with Michael personally, individually, and just to see the depth and the breadth of his wisdom and experience when it comes to discipleship. So, Michael, I'm just so excited to have you on the show so that you can share with us what the Holy Spirit is doing in your heart.
Wow. Yeah, thank you. I've been looking forward to this since you mentioned it, and I'm excited to have this conversation.
So, Michael, you recently created an exciting new course called Practical Spirituality. So I was just wondering if you could tell us a little bit about that course, the inspiration for it, and the fruits of it. And
Thanks. So it really comes out of working in ministry all this time and preparing people in different kinds of ways, from encounter experiences to healing things to different parts and different stages of life, from little ones to grown people, and really seeing where, in a lot of ways, overall, there doesn't seem to be a real forging of like what we're trying to move people through, or so like Sherry Waddell would talk about these thresholds and kind of moving into an intentional disciple, and just seeing a lot of ditches in the way in that. And then in particularly with family, I just don't think that there is, at least not something that people generally are aware of, a guide for what family is supposed to look like. Like, how do we figure this out? And so what I was seeing over and over again, and even in my own life to some degree, was like, even if you become a disciple, it's like, how do you become a disciple with somebody else? Like in a marriage, and even praying together. As it comes to, praying is something probably one of the most intimate things you can do. And it becomes very uncomfortable, I think, for most people to like pray with a spouse. Like they don't know how to do that. And just all the things that come with being a family, from, how to build your home. What do you do with finance? How do you raise your children? Are you a catechist? Are you an evangelist? Are you a chef? Are you, all these things. And what I would see in families in particular, even as they would come to things like Bible study and these various things, there was no central, again, forging of how to put it all together. Like, we all can't be doing this randomly and hoping it works out. And then what I would really see in this sort of 30,000 foot view was that all these different families had like all these plates in the air at the same time, like all these activities, all these things, and they would be exhausted and overwhelmed. There would be competing goods. Which one do I actually do? Which one do I don't do? And I found that in myself, in my own personal life, working in ministry. I would spend, so much time just being away from the home. And after doing it for, I don't know, 15 years, I just started to think like, am I really providing the best for my family when I'm doing a lot of this work outside the home, even though it's ministry, loving people, doing all these great things? I'm losing my health because I'd worked too many hours or whatever, and I just felt like there's something missing. There's some kind of thing here that's missing, a stream of understanding or something that I really just don't get. And as I would talk to people, this was common. It was common for people to feel overwhelmed. They weren't really sure how to do this. Their prayer time in their life wasn't necessarily central, or they were getting to it, all these kinds of things. And then I was able, when the government was shutting everything down during the pandemic, I was able to really take an opportunity with the Lord and spend time with him. It's something I've been wanting to do for a long time. It's just, shut my life down and be with him. And so I really had this opportunity to do that. And at the same time, he brought a book into my life from Father Dwight Longenecker on the Rule of Saint Benedict. And what that book does is it combines the rule with family life, and it looks at fathers as sort of the abbot of the home. And so he takes sections of the rule and kind of opens it up a little bit and then relates it to family. And I got through like 3/4 of it and it was just blowing my mind. Like, this is kind of what I've been looking for. This is something that has a structure that makes sense in all these different ways. And even what St. Benedict was doing at the time was taking the wisdom of the Desert Fathers and then sort of combining them in this simple way around, centrally around God the Father, how to keep prayer and worship at the center, and then how to live our lives in community, loving one another. So this is what the monastic life was like. And it was built in that there was ways in which it could change and move. And I thought, wow, this is really describing domestic church. If it is a monastic community, it is a church, it is my family, this is community. I have a small community, the original small community, the original small group. And so I started to compare and look at these different aspects. And so that led me to being more specific about my own life. So how does this apply to me specifically? What are the things that are in my life that would have to shift? What's my priority, for example? Like, what's my biggest why? Getting that why straight. Like, what is the mission of the family? What is the mission of your family? Like, what are you doing? What do you say you're doing, right? And so it was little things like that I started to move forward and ask new questions. And it led me to a whole process of reordering my life to put certain things in a different priority in a different spot. And what I saw as a result of that is my life started to change. My home started to change.
Wow.
My wife started to change. And I thought, wow, there's really something to this. And I wasn't actually saying a lot. I was just doing a lot. I was doing a lot more based on a certain pattern with a certain intention. And the fundamental heart of all of it was that I was in prayer constantly. I was taking morning to study and pray, hear him, and then take him throughout my entire day, and stopping at times to refocus and realizing that I often didn't do that. Like, you get your day started and you have no idea, even if you go to mass, it's like by the time it gets to noon, you're just somewhere else. And I shifted to have the Lord center throughout the entire day. And so by the end of the day, I was back into prayer. And this, again, is what Benedict, I believe, with having like the divine office, is that way of always returning back to the center part of our life. And so as I was doing that, I was listening to him too. And so I would hear something in the morning, and then I would go do the work. And as I'm doing the work, he's like showing me how these readings, how this inspiration fits to where I'm at. And then I was aware of things happening in my own interior life. Like, it was a struggle, and I can be more specific. And I had to work through some of these struggles. And in working through that, it was like developing virtue. And like all these things he was leading me. The Lord was actually leading me in being transformed. And as I was being transformed, I was transforming my house. And as I was transforming my home, I was transforming my wife and my kids. And I wasn't like the one like doing it, trying really hard to do it. I was just basically doing one thing at a time and doing it completely. And it was, to this day, it's still the same message he keeps bringing to me, as like, slow down, do less, less is more, but start at the beginning and go all the way through and finish it. And I can tell you, as a father, we've lived in our home for almost 30 years now. There's so many projects I would start and not finish, or you got that closet that you can't open or whatever. There's stuff piled in there, and we just never get to those things. Well, I was able to get to all of those things, and I was literally able to transform everything.
Wow.
And yeah, so that was kind of the beginning of it. And the next stage was like, okay, am I the only one crazy doing this, or is there somebody else that makes sense? And I happened to run with a friend of mine, and he and I would meet every morning at 6 o'clock, and we would be reading the same things and talking. And the different things that we were doing is we were reading stuff about Benedict and the church, and then going to work, and then coming the next day and talking about what we heard and what the Lord was doing. And we did that for over a year, probably like 2 years of just every morning getting up, hearing and talking and sharing. So that accompaniment with each other was
Mm.
really big, so that we kind of kept each other on the same page. And that was amazing. And so the next phase for me was then like, how can you make this practical for other people? Is there a way to understand someone's life, no matter where they are, and the unique expression of who they are in their particular area in life? And does this actually meet up and match up? And so that's what this class is. This class is my attempt at bringing some of these foundational principles from our spiritual life to like real work and making it all together, or putting it all together with Christ at the center. And the primary thing being able to say the interior life, as Gru Lagrange would tell us, Dominican theologian, probably the greatest of the 20th century, he would say, the interior life is the one thing necessary.
Mm.
And when you discover that, then everything flows out of that, because in ourselves, the heart is the place where God dwells. It's our
Yes.
deepest self.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's from that place you start to develop greater communion and awareness, and he leads all of the other stuff. And once you get that right, once you get that why right, all these other things can start to fall in place. And so that was my inspiration. That's where I got started. And then I was like, well, how am I going to put this into a class? And there actually wasn't even that. Just to say a little bit more, the class was an invitation. I was thinking about maybe doing a doctoral program with this, or bringing this into something else. I've shared it with other people, but then I had a friend say, why don't you come and teach this over here, and you could work it out yourself? And that kind of led me to, okay, how do I put this together for a class? What are the things I need to have to make this work?
Wow, Michael, that is amazing. I love how you have entered into the wisdom of Saint Benedict, really that listen with the ear of your heart, and attentiveness to your own heart, to the place where God dwells. And as you enter deeper into communion with him, you're able to enter deeper into communion in your own little community and in your
Yep.
family, in the domestic church.
Mm.
And just how that attentiveness to your own heart, to the spiritual battle within, to your own struggles, to growing in virtue, how the transformation of your own heart and the receptiveness of your heart to grace really transformed your family. And I think we can say that like on a more global scale then too, the transformation of the church then really begins in the transformation of the heart.
Yeah.
And so just so beautiful how you were attentive to that and just asking the questions, how do we practically do this? So we have like these content and these theories of like, well, this is what it looks like when somebody's going through a threshold of conversion. But inside each person, it has to be practically lived out. And as you said right at the beginning, it's lived out in relationship. So it's not just your relationship with God, but you're married and you have children. And so you're all entering into relationship with one another and with God. So how do I know how to pray individually? How do I pray with my spouse? How do we pray together? How do we open up our hearts to God and one another for this beautiful communion, this beautiful communion of love that we're all created to?
Yeah. And here's how it started was I started to fix our bed. So I realized my wife, like one of the things I think about is when your life's a mess, what's the one thing where like I would say, where's the boat leaking? Like, where is the thing that needs to be addressed immediately? And for us, it was I just wanted my wife to have a better experience during the day. Things were in the family can get tough. And this was one thing I knew that made her day better. So it started with me. It sounds kind of crazy that I would fix the bed every morning, and immediately that was better for her. That was a way of helping her. So it was like this little sacrifice that I would do for her. And then the next thing was I needed to pray, and I didn't have a place really in the house to do that. We had an extra room, and I wanted to turn that into a prayer room because I needed a door to close, and we really didn't have that space. So I thought, okay, but in order to do the room, I got to pull everything out of there and repaint and all this stuff. So where am I going to put this stuff? Well, the only place I have is my garage. Well, the garage is full of stuff. So it actually started with me cleaning my garage out, and it's kind of an analogy or like a metaphor for all this stuff. And you wouldn't think that's where you start in your prayer life or your spiritual life, but my spiritual life really started fixing my bed and cleaning my garage out. And it was like pulling stuff out of there that had been there for when we moved in. There were still things up in our rafters when we moved in, and tools. You lose a tool, and then you need it when you can't find it, and you go buy another one. Well, I found like all these different tools, that I had bought several different times, and I literally gutted my garage and took out the things that I absolutely needed. Everything else I got rid of in one way or another, and then I created a space just for that. And it was miserable because I'm the kind of person that like, here's the idea, and then I'm ready to move on. This thing took probably like 3 months for me to actually, or maybe not that long, maybe like 2.5 months or so, but I had to stick with it. And that was what the Lord kept calling me to, is like, every day, get up and do this work, be in that space, clean this thing out, get dirty, get sweaty, can't figure out how to put these shelves in. What are you going to, all that kind of stuff was the actual material for the transformation. It was like being with him, and he was showing my heart where I was impatient or how I could keep up with something or whatever, and it was really incredible. And in the meantime, we're, hearing the readings every day, and we're deep into the office. We're deep into the rule, and all these things are just kind of marinating in as I'm working through the day, paying attention to him, the Lord speaking to us. And it was just incredible how it just went from there to like being able to transform the entire home.
Beautiful. Like that garage is like, the image of the heart, right? Like rolling up your sleeves and getting dirty and staying focused. I think sometimes, as you said, and I've been guilty of it too in ministry, we're doing a lot of good things, but we're not focusing on the essential things. The essential things are our hearts. The essential things are our relationships. And so we're kind of scattered and we're focused on other things. And so through this experience of your garage, it's like stick with it. You could do more exciting things, but what this is teaching you is like learn the tools, stay inside, roll up your sleeves, get dirty until the process is done. And that's really like how we focus on our hearts, that like God wants to clean house there too. And in our relationships, and stay in the process, stay in the work, because that's where the transformation and the miracles take place.
Yep. Yeah. And it's very hard to do because especially I've come across and maybe this is true in like our spirituality in general, when we come against these teachings and these specific things like, holding like material things in our life should not be clung to. Like, so we should have a sort of holy indifference to all material things. This is kind of the first principle of Saint Ignatius and his spiritual exercises, is like all these material things are good to the extent that they bring us to God, and then we should let go. So when you're going through your garage, it's like, what is here that I actually need to use that's actually helping my family be better? And what is just here for some other reason that I can get rid of? And it's really kind of looking at your own life that way, and it's really a challenge because some of these things we hold on to for whatever reason, sentimental or whatever, but there's probably a need to let some of that stuff go. And when we start to declutter and put God first, so now everything in the garage isn't organized for its own sake. It's organized to make my family better. So it was organized so that I could have a prayer room. It's organized so I can find my tools. It's organized so that it has a better space. So if anybody needs to use it, I can be generous with my space and my time and invite them in now. Or if they need something, I have it and I can borrow and I can share. Before, it being a mess is like, I have that in there somewhere, or that's the way the whole house and every closet was. It's like, it's there, but I don't know. And I get frustrated. Right. And so even the frustration would disappear. There's peace now. Peace in the home. And so these kinds of things I started to learn are the non-negotiables in my life. Having peace in our home, having that joy, my personal health, getting our finances right, putting Christ first. Like, these are no longer optional. And I know how they all fit together and how they flow. And when I'm doing them, whether it's cooking dinner, folding clothes, cutting the grass, working with friends, I understand that is a part of the vocation to my own holiness, but also sharing Christ with others and walking with them. And I only have that freedom because I've done the work to make it clear, like my life clear, Otherwise, even time is cluttered. Like, how do you use your time, right? So time has to be, in a certain sense, evaluated, and what's important. I always say time is like a spiritual currency, and you're limited to a certain amount of it. And if we're not careful how we use it, it gets cluttered, overused, or used the wrong way, So all of these things, after reading this stuff, as I was like trying to evaluate myself, how to figure all this out. And so that's kind of where I've come to now, is understanding these parts. And now I'm applying them to other people in like a new teaching method to see if it actually sticks to them. Can we actually weld these things now into our life to make them useful and practical for the glory of God and for the transformation of our hearts?
So how is it going? You said you're about 3 weeks into the class. What are the students experiencing? Where's the fruit? What's the feedback there?
So the feedback's been really good so far, but usually the good ones tell you things that are positive. So it started off, and I thought maybe we would have a smaller group, because the way I want to do this is I'm kind of flipping the Bible study method. I figured like Bible study is effective when you come. Preparation is, kind of arbitrary. If you don't prep, that's fine. You could just come, hang out, hear the stuff, have a conversation, go home. And then you learn something, but is it really applying to your life? Does it apply to your family? Does it apply to your neighbor? Like, is it really going beyond just what you learned? I feel like it's kind of in a certain way, kind of contained in its own sort of practice. So what I'm doing is I'm flipping the script on this and saying, here's the material to some degree. Now I want you to go home and practice it. The material starts off with learning to hear the Lord. So it's like getting your prayer life right, being able to hear him, evaluating your time, and then going and practicing this. Like, listen to the Lord for a week, and what are you hearing? Pray consistently. Wow. What are you hearing? And so that's kind of how the sort of class starts. And then when they come back, what I'm doing is I'm having each session is broken up into two sessions, essentially. One is a teaching one, and then the second one is a sharing session. So when they come back for the second part of it, we get together in small groups and talk. And the reason why I'm doing that is because there is no way that I could actually accompany every single one of these people. We have 60 people in the class right now. There's just no way I could actually hear and walk with them to share life. But I also know that each person is uniquely like a genius with God's gifts in and of themselves, and each family is unique. And they're all at different places. They have different personalities, different strengths, and different expressions of what they're going through. So my hope is if we share, then we could experience and know that we're sort of on the same path together, but then support one another in their different areas. Like, maybe your finances are great and mine are terrible. How are you doing this? Yes. Right. And so then share the information. Or like, our home is very peaceful. Well, my kids are out of control. Or if you're young and you're single, it's like, well, I'm worried about school and doing this kind of stuff, or finding a new home. How did you guys figure out how to make this work for you in the beginning? And it's just allowing, once they have the basic principles, practicing it themselves, finding out the challenges and the weaknesses, and then sharing that with one another to come to a greater understanding of what God's doing. So a lot of it is the Lord is leading the entire thing. I'm just providing sort of the framework and the assessments and the guidance, and allowing them to actually practically put it on and share with one another. And so far, the feedback has been fantastic. Everything has been really, really positive. I had a couple yesterday just tell me it's transformational. It's changed their life. He and his wife are talking in a whole new way, like they've never talked before, and that's great. And then I had another lady who, she's like, I love being busy. It's just what I love to do. I never have time for anything. But then she mentioned how the Lord brought something into her life. I think maybe she lost her job or something like that. And it caused her to realize how important time was. So all this stuff is starting to resonate with her at a different point. And I fully expect that everyone's going to have a different experience. Wherever they are, they're going to pick up a different point. But I think in the end, as like the lay apostolate, we start to realize that this vocation has a way in which to have a pattern, or at least a purpose and a goal, where we can decide like the mission for our families, or how to evaluate what's important. Or if you have a decision to make, how do you determine the decision? Like, what are your priorities when it comes to making a decision in terms of discipleship? And then ultimately, just how are we walking together? How are we sharing life together? How are we talking about these kinds of things? And I find that those of us who walk with this and have God at the center, like, make the best kind of friends. It's like friendship in Christ is a different kind of friendship as you're working together, other than like friendship in like football, or friendship over a certain, whatever. Christ has that wonderful way of that commonality, of that very heart of things, of making something unique. And so it's fun to watch people now that don't know each other, that come from different areas, start to meld around this one concept of the priority of the interior life, and trying to hear God, and then trying to live out their vocation and discernment. It's pretty cool.
That's amazing. It's really broken free of that traditional educational model that you and I were speaking about before the show. What I love about this is it's the experiential part of it, right? So you say, go do it, go pray, go manage your finances, go. And then to come back in relationship and community to say, like, how's it going? This is what I'm struggling with, or this is my strengths, and being able to share that with one another and accompany one another, opening up the interior and just learning and growing from one another. So the way that you are forming communion, forming community within this class is just very, very powerful, Michael.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun too. And I think one of the things I'm seeing the most right now is this it's not so much a fear, but it's like this issue of it being like a demand that we have all this structure. And it's true that the structure is important, but what's most true is like being where you are and almost like being more gentle with ourselves. I find that people are way critical. People are working really hard at their lives, and it's really a release of that. It's like a freedom from the sort of bondage of like the drive to just be busy all the time and all these kinds of things. And that almost is like the hardest thing for people to understand is like, how do I just move these things out of the way to work on them without like being more gentle with themselves, like just being in prayer and receiving the Lord. It's not like I have to go to prayer and do a thing. It's like, well, just enjoy being with him and the message and the word he has for you today. Like you have to know you're loved. And it's from that place, from that well of that love, that all these things are possible. You're willing to sacrifice and do all the other stuff if you kind of know him. And I think that's at the heart of the Benedictine rule. I think when they're going to prayer, it's not just about getting through these prayers and praying always and these kinds of things. I think it really is informing the heart, transforming the heart. And then in the monastery, the idea is to love one another. It's like to be, in the challenge of just having a brotherhood or even a sisterhood, like in all the things that kind of bounce against each other and the things that can be trouble, like people can annoy you sometimes. I know it's hard to believe. And even in family, it's like, I love my kids, maybe. I don't know. Some days I don't know. But, even all that kind of stuff. But it's in that area that we're willing to sacrifice more when we know we're assured of his love. And I can't tell you how many times I get up in the morning and maybe I know this already, right? Like I know this, but I'm still kind of like, okay, I'm going to pray. I'm at that point. But once I start to get into the prayer and I hear those words, I hear those Psalms, it just draws me right back into the Lord just being where he's at and hearing the stories, our history, our sort of biblical history of all these challenges of real human stuff. It's like, that's the best to me is like, it's real human stuff. It's like, if you can't do this, it's hard. Let's talk about that. Not like the perfectionism of how we're supposed to be or the ideal stuff. It's like, just be yourself and let the Lord love you into truth about what you're doing and who you are and how critically important your vocation in life is, not relative to anybody else, but relative to what he's asking you to do personally. That's kind of the hump, because everyone has this idea about perfection and living up to some kind of saintly vision, or I don't know what it is exactly, but breaking down that wall has been kind of a little bit of a challenge. Like, just let go of all that and just be wholly you. And people I think are going, well, I don't know what that is. And I'm like, okay, good. Let's find out.
Right.
Take it to prayer, let him love you, and just find that one thing in your home to start and go from there and see what he says. And so that's what's happening.
The word that keeps coming to me, or the phrase, is just like this divine order, right? So like not a rigid structure or a white knuckled way of ordering our life and our family, but just how in your exercise of the garage, like your garage has a purpose, and ordering it for the purpose creates space, creates order, creates flourishing. And so in this divine order in your life, it creates space for you to flourish, for your family to flourish. It's prioritizing the right things. I think that in our day and age, especially, we get so scattered. We focus our attention even on our phone and on social media and on the next news source and on the next thing we're running to and the next thing we're volunteering for. But in this divine order, what is most important and what matters. And I loved how you said, just be wholly you. And isn't that holiness, this wholeness, this flourishing of who I am created to be and how I can glorify God.
Yeah. And my friend who I was working with, he started by putting dishes away.
Mm.
He realized like his house, he has 4 children, and it was just at the time his wife was pregnant with their 4th child, and it was just hard. Kids come home and there's like a lot of busyness and things were all over the place, and they would eat dinner and it was kind of like chaos, and it was a struggle because they would go to bed, they were tired, the house may have been in shambles a little bit, and then to get up and then you got to deal with all that again. And his wife was just kind of like tired, and so to help her, to love her, he goes, I'm just going to clean the kitchen and make sure all the dishes are done every night, just to kind of set the table for the next day. That was like one little commitment that he made as a sacrifice to his family and to his wife. And it changed everything. It was, by like, I forget how many weeks he was into this, and then the kids wanted to help, and then he's showing the kids how to do it. Then they're all participating in this thing. It was just unbelievable to watch what was happening. And I think the difference is like when it's rooted, the intention, when it's rooted in the purpose of like God's will or holiness or the pursuit of him, it has a different power. It's like a different why. I could have cleaned my garage. You can clean anything you want to clean your car, whatever. But when you do it because it serves a purpose for the vocation, like I was saying, like it has a purpose beyond just the fact that my tools are in there. It has a purpose to serve the family. It has a purpose to serve my community. Like I'm available now. And so his home became more available to serve his family simply because he started to put his dishes away every night, and it changed his wife's heart. It changed her perspective of him. Like he cares about me. That was something meaningful to her. It wasn't like I bought her flowers. Don't buy me flowers, clean the kitchen, take the trash out, and so being perceptive about what her need was and then responding to that and then being sacrificial that way was just really good for their marriage. And he would never have seen that if it wasn't for like digging into Benedict, digging into this idea of like this love and this urgency, to really kind of, build this school for the Lord's service, like that's what we're doing. Now I know why we're doing this, because otherwise it ends up being just another task among all the other tasks that I do, that I'm just like, I really just want to go lay down now and maybe watch a movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love this. I love everything about it, the wisdom of the saints and applied to this practical spirituality, this practical growth and holiness. And you found it in Saint Benedict. The wisdom is all there. And for you to do a deep dive into his work and make that accessible to our families, to our communities, to our relationships is just really, really beautiful. So thank you, Michael, for all that you shared and for your wisdom with us today.
Oh, you're very welcome. This has been great.
And Michael, is there a way our guests can contact you if they want to learn more about this practical spirituality?
Well, I would say they could reach out. I have an email address. It's mjk or mjking52@gmail.com. That's mjking52@gmail.com.
Okay.
Or just reach out to you, and if they need to get a hold of me, I'm sure you could forward.
Sure, definitely. We can just put your email in the show notes.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay. Well, Michael, thank you for sharing with us today. And thank you most especially from sharing the fruits of your heart.
Yeah, you're welcome. My pleasure.